Okay. Oops. Welcome everyone to the Active Transportation Committee. Oops, I'm having some screen issues. Hold on. There we go. All right. So welcome to the Active Transportation Committee meeting for February 2021. A reminder that we are recording this and we are streaming live on YouTube. We have our panelists on and any attendees in the attendee room who can raise your hand. You may use the chat, and if you would like to make a public comment in a little bit, once the meeting is officially open and ready, then please raise your hand and we will bring you in to make an audible comment. You'll have 3 minutes to make a comment. And if there is time, we will either respond if it's something that we can respond to this evening, or gather some information and get that back to you. Tonight's chair that will be facilitating the meeting is Daniel Wilson, and what I'm going to do is open it up for public comment. I want to remind folks to be courteous. This is a public meeting. Keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And if you have a comment, please raise your hand. And Daniel, as those come in, I'll hand them off to you and let you know.
Nope. Okay, there we go. Great. Thanks, Shane. Yeah, so do we have any comments from the public?
Sorry, I was on the wrong window there. Here we Richard. Go from Richard. Yeah. Go ahead, Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Hughes. I wanted to bring to the attention of the committee that there has been, and now there's more of a problem on the paths as it relates to road cyclists that sometimes are going too fast, but in many cases, they're not leaving enough distance between themselves and the pedestrians on the path. And this is especially true with the elderly. And I just wanted to bring this up for discussion, and I don't know what can be done. It's not a new problem, but since the paths are more towards full capacity than they were in the past, it's becoming more of a problem.
Great. And next up, we have Steve Piercy.
Can you hear me now?
We got you. We got you.
Okay. I'm speaking in regards to the access of micromobility devices along the Willamette Natural Area path. That off-street connector between Eugene and Springfield is the only connector between the two cities that is off-street. Otherwise, people who are not car owners or don't have the privilege of owning a car to travel on the interstates and highways have no safe access between the two cities. So I have heard that the committee that reviews the Willamette Natural Area has recently come out strongly against allowing any micromobility devices. And it's in my opinion that with that kind of opinion, they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. That decision or opinion effectively says, we don't want to stop the climate crisis. We want to encourage people to drive to get between two cities. We want people to consume fossil fuels to get between the two cities. If they were to allow micromobility devices, it would allow people who are who use electric assist bicycles to travel long distances that they normally would not be able to. This includes families who have e-bikes and cargo bikes, and people who require these devices to travel longer distances. So I would just urge this commission to support the allowance of micromobility devices through the Willamette Natural Area, because it helps us attain our climate recovery ordinance goals, our safety goals, and so many other goals that the city supports. Thank you for your time.
All right, and next up, we have a public comment from Vicky. Bring her on. Go ahead, Vicky.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't going to make public comment, but I would like to respond to Steve Piercy's comment. I am a member of the CPC, although I'm going to be speaking for myself. And I'm not sure that it's general knowledge that there is an East Alton Baker Park plan that was approved by multiple government agencies back in 1996. And I think Sue Wooling, I think, actually had a part in that. And in the park plan, it specifically states that there's no motorized vehicles other than maintenance and safety vehicles allowed in the park. And so it's per the park plan, and the committee is formed in order to implement the park plan and to assure that what the plan states maybe would be remind the public that this is a plan that and what our motion was to reaffirm the park plan. So I'm not sure that the public is aware that there is this plan, and there's a lot of other really good things in it to keep it a natural area, which means not developed. So I just wanted to clarify that for everyone that's maybe listening right now. Thank you.
Great, and that looks like, unless someone else from the audience would like to raise your hand, that looks like all the comments that we have right now. And great, so I'll hand it back to you, Daniel.
All right, so the next item is to approve the January notes. If everyone's had a chance to look at that, we can hear a motion.
I'll move to accept the minutes as distributed.
I'll second.
All right, thumbs down, thumbs up, thumbs down, or to the side. Okay, looks like all thumbs are up. So we'll accept January minutes. The next item is bike share, scooter share update. Shane and Karen Mason.
I'll go first since my name was on there first, and then we'll let Karen talk about scooters. So we did put out our letter of intent to award last week, or just over a week ago, and the time for any contesting of that notice has passed, and there were no contests to that notice. So we are in the contracting process right now with Fourth Mobility Fund and Cascadia Mobility. Cascadia Mobility is a nonprofit that will be started under Fourth Mobility Fund. And this is very early on in the process of us having that contract with them, but we did give that letter of intent to award, and I'm very excited about that potential. I know that that was a direction that the ATC was hoping we would go with a nonprofit. And out of the strong proposals that we received, it was the one that scored the best and has some really great potentials for us operating in the future. There's lots of pieces to be worked out, but our timeline right now is still aiming for an April timeline for them to take over operations. They'll be starting something hopefully with us in March to allow them to start getting everything lined up. But by April, which is a fitting time because April 2018 was when we kicked off BikeShare originally. And so this will be our 3-year anniversary. And it'll be a great time to celebrate as we go into May as Bike Month and celebrate a new operator and a rebirth of BikeShare. So it's pretty exciting times.
And hi, everybody. I'm Karen Mason. I'm an assistant planner with the City of Eugene. I've been working on our e-scooter share pilot program. I also work on our EV strategy implementation plan. So I believe a lot of you all know that last summer, City Council passed an ordinance allowing a scooter pilot program to take place. So to help work towards that, a lot of the work that I've been doing recently has been on drafting an administrative rule to regulate that pilot program. That draft administrative rule is done and has begun to undergo review. It's been reviewed by members of the transportation planning team. It's been looked at by a policy analyst from a third-party data share company called Ride Report. It's been looked at by some other city departments like our parking department, parks and open space, and an equity analyst with public works engineering. So I've been working on taking all of their comments and creating a second draft, which is almost ready to go. That will start working its way up the chain for formal review and adoption as per our city attorney. So there's a lot of different steps involved with that. It's going to be at least a 2-month-long process for that formal review and adoption to take place. During that, there is going to be a formal public comment period. And I would love to come back to all y'all next month. Hopefully that will align more with when the formal public comment is either underway or about to be underway. Concurrently, as that is undergoing review, there is also a request for information that is ready to go out the door whenever we decide to pull the trigger on that. And that will help basically inform us on what different companies are interested in operating here. We do know that there are a little different cities. So we get emails from, not cities, different companies. We get emails from a bunch like Lime, Bird, Spin, Link is a new one out there. And it would help basically inform us on what abilities they have to meet a lot of our goals, our hopes, dreams, some of our concerns. Basically, so when we are ready to start reviewing applications, it is going to be for a license. And there's a lot of different components to the license as written into the administrative rule. So there's a lot of things in there around like submitting a life cycle analysis, an end of life plan, a community engagement plan, an equity plan. And just because a company is going to submit an application for a license doesn't mean they're going to get it. There is going to be a lot of review going into this. There's going to be a panel of different stakeholders assembled, including representatives from the University of Oregon and from LTD, amongst others. and what is currently written into the administrative rule around all those different pieces, that is still kind of per the review form from our city attorney and others who are higher and more just higher above. So that is where that kind of is at the moment. We are aiming for a late April to mid-May launch currently. That could potentially change depending on guidance surrounding the coronavirus as it continues to move forward into the future. And I would be more than happy to take questions. I will put my email in the chat. I will be happy to take questions via email and discuss this further, potentially in a more formal presentation next month or in the future. Thank you.
Great, and I'll also, looks like we have some time, so if there are questions about bike share or maybe even any questions now, we do have a moment.
So I see a few hands. Apologies if I'm getting the order wrong. Okay, I've got Steve, Andrew, Sue, and Pete, and Alan. I'm writing down.
Okay, I'll be real quick. I just want to once again give kudos to the staff on the bike share. You guys responded so agilely to an unexpected situation. And as far as I could tell, the public facing, of this has been sort of seamless. So great job. And that's all I had to say.
Andrew?
Yeah, I had a question about the scooters, but it sounds like maybe we're going to do that again later. So I'll just hold my question and let whoever has questions about bike share go.
Sue, Pete, then Alan.
Yeah, Shane, on the bike share, I was just wondering, I've heard, I think that you're working on, or someone is working on the kind of updating the software on the bikes to replace the keypads with the, is that in any way related to the new operator? Because those keypads are really getting to be a problem when I've tried to use it. So just curious.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, they are definitely starting to become an issue. And it isn't really related to the new operator. We needed to change those over anyway. And so we've been looking at the timeline for being able to do that. We have to purchase these new controllers from the provider, and that didn't really matter who our contract for the operator was. But these new controllers are updated to be compatible with a broader cell network, so LTE and 4G, so that it's easier for the bikes to find a signal. They're currently 2G, and so they don't find signals as well, but they're also touchless, and they allow people to check out the bikes using a QR code or a card if they don't have a smartphone. So it's a lot more seamless than the push button aspect that we have now. We have a prototype, but a production model that we're testing before we order it. And our field techs seem to think that it's really great. They're excited about some extended battery life, but also because it's a better cell connection, that could change the battery life a little bit, sort of depending on where it is. But the overall operations look to be much better with this controller. So I'm excited to get them on there. We are, because of COVID and just the financial situation that we're in, trying to find that funding, but it looks like we might have some funding to pull that together and get an order in. It will take a few months to get them in, and then the new operator will need to find the time to transition to those.
Thank you. Is Pete next, and then Alan?
I was just going to ask if we have defined an area for the e-scooter stuff to happen? Is it going to be just downtown, or is it going to be in adjoining neighborhoods? How far or has that even been decided yet?
So we will be working with whatever companies we decide to issue a license to kind of determine the exact geographic boundaries. But our hope is to be able to have it serve a wider geographic area than our bike share currently does. And we would like to get it out to areas, for instance, like West Eugene, potentially out into the Santa Clara neighborhoods. But again, that would all kind of still pend further discussion.
Alan?
Okay. And Jean, can you tell us anything more about the operator that was selected and what some of the elements of their proposal that were particularly appealing?
Yeah. Fourth, I think, we haven't made an official announcement yet. We plan to do a press release, and once all the contract is finalized. And so that's one of the reasons that I don't want to, I don't have all of the information and don't want to go too deep into discussion just because we want that to be finalized. But I can tell you that their proposal was really strong. Their focus was definitely on utilizing our existing system, utilizing our existing bikes, and making it better. Operating as a nonprofit rather than a for-profit business. It was really focused on what our community goals were around transportation and with the bike share system. They were also very experienced with our system because a lot of the people who were involved with Social Bicycles from the beginning or involved with Peace Health Rides operation at some level. So they intimately know our operations. And I think are going to bring a lot of flexibility that they were sort of constrained from in the past. And so changing from a large for-profit company to a smaller nonprofit that has grand goals and aspirations, I think was part of what excited us. There was also interest and an expressed sort of buy-in from ODOT in supporting this nonprofit. And so they are interested in not only building up our community system, but the potential of a statewide system. And they've been working with ODOT on that potential. And we feel like they're going to be focused on getting our system stable, but also looking at how we might integrate with ODOT and our regional TO coordinators in other communities to potentially collaborate on a statewide bike share system and help affect some of the statewide transportation option goals that we have utilizing this really great tool. It's proven successful in Eugene, and other communities were also operating bike share systems that unfortunately, because of COVID and because of other companies pulling out, they lost their bike share. And so there's some pretty exciting potentials with this nonprofit being able to expand the reach beyond Eugene even. So those were some of the things that excited us about their interest and vision. It's certainly been quite a ride this last 9 months of us operating the bike share, and we knew our bike share system really well before, and other staff, especially Reed, had put a lot of time and effort into getting it off the ground and making sure that it was running well with that operator. But with the transition that happened because of COVID and just all of that time, I think that we've really seen the potential of what a new format can do for us. So it's exciting. I hope that
Just
answered
to
it.
add on to that, as an LTD staff person, I got to talk to them, the new operator, and I'm really excited because they're super interested in making bike share work with transit a lot better, which is not necessarily something that we got from the previous operator. So they're interested in really kind of leveraging both of those as really great modes. And that's exciting to me as a staff person at LTD and also a community member who rides PeaceHealth rides. So I was really impressed.
Yeah, and I think Fourth Mobility has done a lot in the past, as Steve mentions, with EVs and even active transportation and bike share and micromobility. And so having that as sort of the umbrella organization that is supporting this startup of Cascadia Mobility, there's some exciting things. We've talked to them already about different services around education and programming expansion that we can do. That, you know, I think PeaceHealth Rides always wanted to do, but it didn't always match their business model. And I think it's a new business model now that will involve our partners a lot more at LTD and the U of O. So that's pretty exciting for us.
Great. Thanks for that update. Where is Fourth Mobility located?
Portland.
I have a question about going back to scooters. Again, I don't know if this is the meeting for it. Maybe it's next time, but thinking now that rulemaking is happening, it could be the right time. I have two questions. One is about community engagement and thinking about community-based organizations and if scooters fit into the mobility needs identified by communities themselves. So I know that sometimes there's a disconnect there. And just so maybe that's something that is starting now, even before like a couple months in advance of scooters potentially hitting the streets. And like what community needs might be if it's the smartphone based, you know, cash based, et cetera. So that's one part. And then the second question is related to maybe it's the rulemaking, maybe it comes later with discussions about the companies that are chosen for licensing. If there's thinking right now about the goals or performance metrics behind the scooter program and what Eugene hopes will happen around it, and if those are connected to say data requests and a plan for how and who will evaluate it, because again, it's partly I'm in the middle of a project that whole arc isn't always connected, and I think there's a lot of good intention behind developing the programs, but not always a follow through, and how is it working for the community? And so I'm curious about if that's already part of the conversation.
So late 2019, we actually did a whole community engagement campaign where we did an online survey, listening sessions, and spoke to a bunch of community stakeholder organizations. There is a summary report of everything that we got out of that. We came to the ATC twice during that time period. I can provide that report. It's also on our Engage Eugene e-scooter page. But through that, we heard a lot of what the community values regarding safety, sustainability, and equity. And we have worked that into our program goals and performance metrics. Some of the things that we heard about equity was definitely the need to have like materials and services available in multiple languages, the need for people who are unbanked and perhaps don't have access to smartphones. How would they be able to access the service? So that is all kind of written into the RFI. It is going to help our evaluation process as we get back the responses to the RFI, to the license applications. So yeah, a lot of that has been being thought about.
Thanks, Karen. I'll Google the report. I know I took the survey, but I didn't know the report was out. So new to the ATC. Thank you.
And a quick, just little interesting tidbit. I started my work on e-scooters as a master's student at the UO, and Anne was my thesis advisor. So
full circle.
We should be respectful of Rob's time. Are there any other quick questions on this topic? Great. If we can just take a moment, we have our Springfield BPAC liaison here. Bryce, do you want to introduce yourself briefly? There we go.
There we go. Nope.
Still no.
Maybe after Rob.
Yeah, let's come back to you if you don't mind, Bryce. So the next topic is micromobility devices in the Willamette National Natural Area. So that's Rob.
We'll talk about Willamette National Forest another day. So I'm Rob Interfeld. I'm the team manager, the transportation planning manager, and want to welcome all the new members of the ATC. I actually watched the last meeting on YouTube, and I just was really impressed with all the experience that you bring. And I, of course, value the existing members too very much. So yeah, I'm here to talk about electric micromobility devices in the Willowboon Natural Area. And just to make sure everyone's on the same page, what we're talking about here are electric scooters, electric skateboards, electric bicycles, other small electric devices. We're not talking about electric wheelchairs or devices for people that have limited mobility, because they're already allowed anywhere on our path system. The last July, we went to City Council and they passed a update to the city code to specifically allow electric micromobility devices on the shared use paths in Eugene, because up until then, only electric bikes were allowed. So now all those other devices are allowed on our shared use paths as well. However, the Willamette Natural Area Plan kind of supersedes that. So the plan prohibits motorized devices in the Willamette Natural Area. So the update to the code does not apply to that area, which is roughly everything between Leisure Lane, where Nearby Nature and the Native Plant Nursery are. From there east to I-5, that part of Alton Baker Park is the Willamette Natural Area. We did point out in the memo to City Council that there was that prohibition there, and I think some people in the community read that, including Steve Piercy, who you heard from earlier. And when we had the public hearing, about 3 or so people testified. I think Andrew Martin too testified that the city should allow electric devices in the Willamette Natural Area. So I think as a result of that, Councillor Alan Zelenka, he brought a motion forward that was passed by the City Council, and it said, I move to direct the city manager to seek input from the Willamette Citizen Planning Committee about the allowance of electric powered micromobility devices on all or a limited number of shared use paths within East Alton Baker Park, and then to schedule a City Council work session to discuss the possibility. So I met with the Citizens Planning Committee for the Willamette Natural Area last October, and at that meeting they weren't able to come to an agreement on like a position for that group to provide input. So I went back to them in January of this year and brought a proposal to them for what I saw as sort of like a beginning of the conversation for where such devices could be allowed in the Willamette Natural Area, and partially looking at the City Council's direction that to consider a certain, rather than on all paths in the natural area, to consider electric devices on just some. And Lee shared that with you. The CPC, that's the acronym for the group, they decided to not really get into the details of that. I guess I would just say they felt pretty strongly that the devices shouldn't be allowed in the natural area for reasons having to do with ecology or just the animals that live there, and that they sometimes get hit or get threatened by people biking or traveling fast in the natural area. One of the things we talked about in the meeting is just that regardless of what the City Council does, people will probably choose to use their devices, their own personal devices in the natural area. People are already doing that with their own personal scooters or electric bikes. And to the extent that the council makes a decision, it may have a bigger impact on shared electric devices, because when we contract for what Karen was talking about earlier, there's a technology called geofencing, and we could literally say these devices are not allowed in a certain area, and then that you just wouldn't be able to go there with one of those devices. We also can other ways we can use geofencing are limiting where people can park and also limiting the speed of the devices. So like, for example, something Karen and I have talked about is that citywide, we might have a speed limit of 15 on these devices, but on our paths, it could be 12. And in certain areas in the natural area where there's maybe more potential for conflict, it could even be lower, like 8 to 10 miles an hour. So those are just some ideas we put out there. I know Lee shared this all with you. The CPC motion is pretty brief, so why don't I just read it really quickly. The CPC reaffirms its commitment to the East Allenbaker Park Plan's limitations on motorized vehicle use in the Willow Moon natural area of Allenbaker Park, while the CPC recognizes increasing local availability of individual and fleet-based motorized scooters. This acknowledgement is no reason to weaken or reject the aspirations of the park plan. The majority of CPC members still support a ban on motorized vehicles in the Willow Moon natural area. They voted 8-3 along those lines. And I'm pretty sure the city council could decide to amend the plan to allow electric devices on certain facilities there. There was Lee Shoemaker could speak to this, but there was a time where people were using like the gas-powered scooters in our paths and in our parks, and I think they still do to some extent. And I think that when we banned motorized devices, in some ways, I think it was more aimed at that. But I don't want to speak for the CPC, and I respect the perspective where they're coming from. In terms of what Vicky was saying before when she testified, gave you a public comment. I mean, she was saying respect the plan. I guess to me, the more important thing is like, what are the principles behind it, and what, it's ultimately going to be the city council's decision. And so it's a balance. I just say it's a balancing act between these different needs. And I wanted to give you all an opportunity to just hear about this. And if you choose to, you could also provide some public comment to the city council. The soonest we're tentatively scheduled to go to the city council on March 8th. And that could be rescheduled for a later date. If you would like, I could also put the map up if people what I had proposed to the CPC, if people have questions about that, or if you just want me to kind of walk through it with you. Would that be helpful? I see Julie. Anyone else? People, not Daniel. All right, let me see if I can figure out how to do that. If you can just bear with me for a second.
Yeah, can you do a share screen so we can just have the map?
Right, that's what
I've got
just
my bike
trying to do that.
but I know you had I can't look at all these things at once on my tiny screen.
I'm having, let's see.
It's not super important, but don't.
It'll just take me a minute. Oh wait, show all windows. Let me see if that worked. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so you can see here, I'm sorry, the lines aren't thicker. This is my amateur map making skills, but the idea is that the red lines would be shared use paths where where no electric devices would be allowed, and especially the shared ones. The yellow is paths where they would be allowed, but they would be geofenced to a lower speed, and then the green would just be they would be available to use. And so part of the thinking was, most of the green paths you see here that are in the Willow Moon natural area are actually former roads, and they're quite wide. Not the one that's north-south by I-5. That's a pretty standard path, but it's relatively straight, and I don't think it's very highly used. And then the yellow are narrower, they're curvier, and so I thought it would make sense for the speed to be lower. And then Parks and Open Space staff requested a lower speed also in Leisure Lane, and so that's why we made that yellow. And I think it could just be that there's parents dropping kids off in nearby nature and just a lot of activity around there. And yeah, that's basically it. I thought that, I want to acknowledge that the area on either side of the Fernmeyer Bridge, it's kind of curvy. The path's not super wide, but it's also like part of our main stem riverbank path system. So it's just hard to see that we wouldn't have electric devices there if people are just wanting to kind of travel around the network. But I recognize that is an area where I could see people would be concerned. I think that's all I have to say.
Looks like we had a couple of hands, Steve, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rob, and for all the people who have spoken. In fact, I spent several trips out in the last couple of days riding around on my electric bike to see, what is the reasonable path out here, because it seemed to me that there is one. And while utterly respecting the intent of the initial park plan, I do think the motorized devices 1996 mean something very different than what they mean today with electric bikes. And I do believe, that Day Island Road connects to Walnut, connects to D Street in Springfield. I think there is probably a reasonable compromise that could be had here that is only a very tiny bit of connection on the Canoe Canal path that puts you between fairly big roads. And the only other thing I would add to that is, as we're finding out, electric bikes are really quite popular now. They're quite valuable to the effort to substitute for trips in cars. They're finding more and more that it's the most used option to substitute for a car trip. And even our Congressman Blumenauer has just co-sponsored a bill to give a 30% tax credit, federal tax credit, to e-bike purchasers. So there's a lot of movement going on, and I think we should really make sure that we're having a full discussion on all this, and we may be talking past each other.
I saw Andrew, Josh, Alan, Papa, Julie, Sue. Sorry.
So I guess I have a couple of maybe things that I want to introduce in the discussion. Maybe they're not even all formed thoughts. So I guess the first is, I guess I didn't know that plan hadn't been updated in about 25 years, which is a long time for a plan. Our goals evolve over time, right? If you went and looked at our transportation system plan from 25 years ago, I don't recall what it was. Rob might know, but predates Trans Plan, which is a super dated plan anyway. The things that we strive towards and the things that we thought we wanted to do have changed over time a lot in our transportation plans. And I'm not a parks planner, but I would assume that in parks, there are probably similar evolutions, not radical changes. I do really appreciate having a natural area in town, especially close. As someone who's not an ecologist, I wonder though how much value, like ecosystem type services, we get from that. Not questioning whether we should have areas, but I'm just thinking with the I-5 bridge providing light, noise, and air pollution, with Autzen Stadium providing lots of light and sometimes noise pollution, right? Like, I guess I'm just wondering how much the incremental value of allowing electric micromobility devices would be. Because for someone who's not as maybe well versed in the ecology of that area, it seems to me that that wouldn't be a radical change compared to the types of pollution that already exist in that area. And I guess the last point would just be that if we're left in a place where we have maybe two competing goals, the goals of the parks plan, if we still, not we as a body, but the community still values those goals. We also, I think, have a lot of transportation goals. If you look at our transportation system plan, one of those is tripling the number of people who take trips by walking, biking, and I would assume electric micromobility falls into that category. And you can't go to Springfield without using this path system. People are already doing it. That's kind of been acknowledged today. But I think, from the transportation side, which is what we advise on, we want to encourage that, actually. So I think at the end of the day, if what we come to is that City Council has a really tough public policy decision to make about our park space versus our transportation system, I would encourage ATC members to look really critically at the issue. But I know for me personally, providing a really safe connection that allows people to use active transportation to go between the two major cities in our metropolitan area is something that's really important to me. And we may have to make a choice that's difficult, understanding that both of those goals are really valid. So I'll just stop there.
Josh, then Alan.
Yeah, my major concern about outright banning something is that we don't have a good method of enforcement. And so we are going to see private scooters and bikes. In fact, we already do on this section now. And that's only going to expand as these devices get cheaper. And so I hear the ecological concerns, but I don't think this is actually something we can prevent. And if what we choose to do with the scooter share is just say they can't ride here, then what we're doing is giving up a tool of control that we have, because we can control the speed of shared devices. We can't control the speed of individual devices. And then I think the one other thing I will say is we heard at the top of this meeting about speed concerns on off-street paths. And so that is something we need to address regardless of whatever decision gets made here. But I hear that's also influencing what some of the concerns in this particular area are.
I've got both a question and a comment. First, my question, I guess, for Rob would be regarding the geofencing. If a shared mobility device user hit the edge of the path, say the river path, and it was in a prohibited zone, what would happen? Would they be somehow communicated to reroute to another location? Would the vehicle just stop engaging in electrical use, or how would people even know that they didn't have some sort of malfunction?
I'll let Karen, our in-house geofencing expert, answer that question.
So with that, it would not be an abrupt edge. It would be a slow reduction of speed. Our goal is not to send people flying over handlebars. And then it would also, there would be various methods of communication. We ask, for instance, we would be asking for maps on the apps, on websites, some kind of notification that you are approaching an area that would have a slower zone, or potentially a no riding zone as well. It would probably most likely be through some kind of like audible beeping from the scooter. But yeah, definitely not wanting people thrown over handlebars.
Good. So thanks for that answer. So my comment would be, since there's perceived concerns by some people about the ecological ramifications or safety concerns, is it possible to propose a policy or a change to the plan that might have a limited duration, say 3 years, so that there would be an opportunity to evaluate whether those actually materialize or not? And if they do, then that can be reconsidered, but otherwise it could be extended.
So there was Papa, then Julie, then Sue.
Yes, actually, my question was the same one as Alan was going to ask about the geofencing, just how it worked. And I was concerned about the safety factor, and you explained it. You won't come to an abrupt stop. But the other question is, what areas has this worked in other cities that, you can give us an example of, since it's so new?
The closest example would be just 2 hours north in Portland, but a lot of cities do use that type of use geofencing as a tool for their shared use scooter systems.
Is that what you're asking, Papa? Like specifically, how's the geofencing working in other cities?
Okay.
Yes,
yeah. And my question was, how specifically does it work, and in terms of maintenance of it, and difficulty of operations, what does it take? Is it something very simple that can do or wouldn't cost that much?
So I think I'm understanding the question, but basically it would be like a communication between the device itself and like basically, as you enter a certain area, the scooter would kind of read through these like signals, and they would either come to a slow stop or a slower speed. It's kind of the same way that Google Maps on your phone or Apple Maps kind of knows where you are. It's through that type of same locational tracking ability. Does that kind of answer a little bit?
Yes, it answers it. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, I think most people sort of covered the things I was going to comment on, but I do think it's really important for, especially for, you know, older riders. I'm always advocating for us older riders to have a safe way to get around, and that is, you know, the paths, especially the road through the park, really is the safest way to cross a section of town. And I know that I use it a lot, and I'm willing to be banned from the actual very pretty little winding river path. And it seems like it'd be really easy to do that with one of those metal, you know, gates that has one and then the other. So you have to make a very awkward turn. You can get through it. A person can walk through it. You get a wheelchair through it, but it is more awkward to get a bike through it. And I don't see why we couldn't have that to really keep bikes right off that stretch, because people do just barrel down there when there's pedestrians walking, and that is a very pretty area right by the river. But having the main road through there and the one by I-5, it just seems like if we're going to increase the number of people riding and using mobility devices of various kinds, we just have to keep them safe, and it's really not safe on a lot of our streets. Thanks.
What Julie's proposing of like not allowing bikes on a certain section is they do that in Eastgate Woodlands and on the Springfield side of the Willamette Natural Area. So there's an example there of that.
We're a little bit over our time. Rob, do you have to go?
No, I can stay. If I'm a little late for my next meeting, it's fine.
Okay, so I saw hands from Sue, and then Mary, and then Josh.
Yeah, just a couple of technical legal kinds of things for Rob. In the first place, I think that East Alton Baker Park Plan, as it was called at the time, was it was actually the result of a citywide vote of the citizens. So I was wondering if that affects anything about whether the council can just change it just by their decision. Is it different in that respect? And also, I believe the plan also included, you know, all of the Eastgate Woodlands. So while that's under the jurisdiction of Willamette Lane, not the City of Eugene, would this policy apply to the whole area or just the part west of I-5? And then just for comments, I guess the plan from the outset recognized that, you know, there are also transportation corridors through here for non-motorized transportation. And at the time, obviously, there was no such thing as an electric bicycle or electric vehicle of any kind. So I do think that in the spirit of the plan, if not in the letter of the plan, these things should be allowed, frankly. I think the transportation needs far outweigh, frankly, the any effect, because there's really nothing to say that the electric scooters are going to be going faster than anyone can ride a bike right now, and particularly electric bikes. I'm not quite sure what the concern is exactly. And I guess, so I guess ultimately at the end of the discussion, I would move that the ATC draft a letter to send to council supporting the allowing electric powered scooters and bicycles in the Willamette Natural Area. And I'm okay with the plan that Rob outlined, or just in general, so.
Go for it, Mary. We have, Shane reminded me we have some other things to get to. So maybe we could wrap this up soon.
Okay. Yeah, I think there have been a lot of really good comments here, and I just wanted to take a moment to really empathize with the concerns of adding electric vehicles. I understand that that's going to that's kind of the way of the future, but the bucolic nature of Alton Baker Park and that area is something to really cherish. So I just really want to say, I empathize, but it's not like these lakes that we have where they don't have motorized vehicles, because that's such an obvious disruption to the ecology. And that has more to do with recreating, and this is transportation. So I would agree with Andrew that we need to have the transportation through there. And but I really appreciate also the Rob's and whoever else's efforts to keep it to the transportation corridors and off of and I don't know, maybe that needs to be looked at even more. It looks like you've done a pretty good job there as far as I can tell, but limiting the number of paths, and also doing whatever we can to keep the speeds down, because I think that is a concern, just as it has been on the bike paths around town. And I don't know the answer to that, but that's got to be part of the effort.
Should I go or should we move on, Daniel?
Can you make it brief?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
I mean, just sort of continuing on the aspect of the ecological impact, what are the sort of concrete concerns that, that electric vehicles bring that, say, a bicycle doesn't? I mean, are there any sort of quantifiable metrics by which we can say an electric scooter or an electric bike pollutes more or disrupts the ecology more than, say, a regular bike? I mean, I've seen electric bikes that run much quieter than, say, a rusty old bike that's squeaking and dripping oil and everywhere. So I'm not exactly sure how one quantifies the sort of ecological impact of one versus the other.
I'm trying to find my notes from the meeting. Karen, did you happen to have any notes handy? Because I think, honestly, I think part of it was that it would bring more people. And so it's not just the characteristics of how they travel, but just the quantity. And I think you're raising some good questions, though. And honestly, they didn't really get to that level of detail either. Would you have anything to add to that, Karen?
I do not know. It was
okay.
A lot of the things have already been discussed, and I think Vicky is in the chat addressing some of those concerns as well.
Okay. So I guess there's a question Sue had suggested earlier that you all take up a motion. It's your decision, obviously, as to whether you want to do that or not.
I would second that motion. And I would just add quickly that it may very well be that by devising a plan that connects also with BPAC and the Springfield portion of this, but by devising a route, as Rob has started to do, and signing it, we may actually be benefiting everybody's intentions, because we could direct traffic, which is not done today, direct micro-mobility traffic, and also ban it from the other paths, the more sensitive paths, which is not done today in any signing effort. It might benefit everybody.
There's been discussion of a motion. Would anyone like to make one?
I think I already did, didn't I?
Oh, excuse me.
Could
I think you said you said you would entertain one, but you didn't state you would.
I move that the ATC draft a letter to the city council supporting allowing electric bicycles and micromobility devices in the Willamette Natural Area, and including the East Alton Baker Park area, along the lines that what Rob outlined. That's a kind of ugly motion, but you know what I mean.
I'll second.
Any discussion before we vote? Okay. Thumbs?
I'll note that Mary has her hand up.
Yep, go for it.
I was going to just say that, I mean, I think we should do it, but I would want to then have the letter, because that's something that we could also see and vote on because I would want to see, are there conditions in it? You know, what do we say in it? And will there be a chance to refine this said letter?
Somewhat similar from my point of view is that I'd like to say yes, but I'd like it to include, and there be signage to direct traffic to the main routes, and means to restrict traffic on more sensitive areas, and that be included, not just, yes, we think there should be devices going through.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Rob, can I get a check on your timeline for if ATC was going to submit something?
So like
You
I
said
said,
March.
we're tentatively scheduled to go to council March 8th. There's a very good chance that will get pushed back just because of the nature of this issue. I don't know if ATC can communicate by email to finalize things like this, Lee, if that's something that's allowed by the bylaws or that's been done before.
Sure, they should go ahead and vote on the motion, and they can wordsmith it in the meantime. And then they can come back to the next meeting and make a more formal vote, but they can submit that letter to you earlier.
Will there be enough time? Josh has a hand.
I would just suggest that we delegate the writing of the letter to a subcommittee that can, an ad hoc subcommittee that can just handle that. I trust the people who have already expressed some desire for wordsmithing, that they will do a good job with it. And so I'm happy to vote yes for the motion and let them handle the details.
And just to confirm, we have in the past had a motion that directs a committee to create the letter, and that the committee affirms their acceptance of the principle, and trusts the committee to complete that, so it can be submitted.
Could we have the letter at least be put out on via email so that there could be input, because there might be some good input from the group after a draft is created?
Yep.
Okay. Do we want to form that committee now? We can also put that off to item 7 when we're going to discuss subcommittees. So for now, let's proceed with the vote of Sue's proposal as amended to draft the letter. Thumbs. Okay, seeing only thumbs up, it passes. Great.
Well, thanks for the time, everyone. I'm going to dash to the friendly area neighbors discussion of transportation issues. So, but look forward to seeing you all again. And yeah.
Thank you, Rob.
Sure, bye.
Okay, so we are 13 minutes over time. Hopefully we can recover it near the end. So the next item is transportation options with Larissa.
And Larissa, you want to introduce yourself too? I assume you will, but.
Yeah, I'm going to get my screen up and running, and then I can do that. Okay, do you see the full screen version of the presentation?
Yep.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Great, so I am Larissa Barilla. I'm a transportation planner with the City of Eugene and project manager for several projects. My newest project is in short, called the TDMTIA growth strategy. And for those of you who don't know those acronyms, I'll tell you in a moment. But longer name for it is Transportation Options Strategies for Growing Eugene. And so I'm going to give you an introduction to this new project. So presentation outline is to introduce you to the project, the purpose and the need. And then talk about the planning process, talk about stakeholder involvement that we've completed to date, and let you know how you can stay aware and up to date. Are the slides moving for you all?
Yep.
So why are we doing this project? So this project is a city council priority. So when we adopted the transportation system plan, city council identified some actions that were a priority. And those actions are mostly related to our goals to triple the percentage of trips that are made by walking and biking, reduce fossil fuel use as part of our climate recovery ordinance, and eliminate deaths and life-changing injuries as part of Vision Zero. And so this project is an opportunity to implement some aspects of those plans. And so when we worked on our TSP, so our TSP is our long range transportation system plan. It looks at a 20-year time horizon. And so when we were doing the analysis for that plan, we learned and were reminded that Eugene is growing. And so there's projected to be 47,820 people added to Eugene by 2035. And so if we think about that and think about maybe how many of those people would be driving age and how many people would bring their cars to Eugene, that's a problem because that would create more cars on our transportation system where we might at some point have capacity issues with that. And so another reason we're doing this project is because we need to work harder on shifting the modes of transportation away from cars, getting people to use more active transportation, people that move here, but also people that live here currently. And so for those of you who don't know these acronyms, I'm going to use them a lot in this presentation. So Transportation Demand Management, TDM. So these are strategies and policies that reduce single occupancy vehicle use, redistribute travel demand by space or time, and then promote active transportation for getting around. And then traffic impact analysis is the other acronym that I'm going to use. And it's a more technical process where we evaluate the anticipated transportation impacts associated with new development and identify strategies to mitigate and accommodate those impacts. And so when we worked on our TSP, we had a few actions in the TSP to help us in these different areas. So one of them was to require developers and employers of a certain size to prepare, implement, and monitor TDM plans. And then the other one was more related to traffic impact analysis, but it was to expand and measure the proposed development traffic impacts beyond the level of service measurement, include review of walking and biking improvements and connections to nearby networks, and review safety at intersections through a comparison of the actual crash rates to inform improvements. And one thing to note, when the TSP was adopted, we hadn't completed our Vision Zero action plan. And so Vision Zero didn't exist in the way that it does today upon adoption of the TSP. And so just a little bit of background of what is done in Eugene today. So right now for transportation demand management, so getting people to create programs to promote active transportation. So what triggers that today is when a new development requests adjustments to required parking spaces. And so if a development requests a reduction, then they have to put together what's called a TDM. And so right now how that works is when that trigger happens, then the city has this list of options that could promote transportation demand management, transportation options, but there's not really any quantifiable measure of like how much greenhouse gas emissions or vehicle miles traveled any of those strategies reduces, kind of just a laundry list of different things the developer could do. And then for TIAs in Eugene today, what happens is new developments that trigger 100+ vehicle trips during the peak commute times, that will trigger a traffic impact analysis potentially. And it's really focused on level of service, which is really focused on vehicles, motor vehicles only. And so it doesn't really take into consideration the multimodal component of our transportation system. And if those triggers occur, then the city does have the ability to put in conditions of approval, but we have been challenged to create conditions of approval that are multimodal. And a lot of that is based on the negotiations between city staff and the developers, and we have less of an ability to require certain things like a protected crosswalk when a development comes in today. So that's a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to talk about the process. So this can get very complex and wonky very quickly. So if you have any questions while I'm going through this, definitely jot them down and you can ask me towards the end of the presentation. But essentially the different areas that we're looking at are these 3 areas. So one is updated traffic impact analysis guidelines. So those would apply to new development. Another area is TDM requirements for new development. So one could be more like soft infrastructure related, and then the other would be more programmatic related. And then the third one is TDM requirements for existing employers and or multifamily housing. And so really quickly, why employers? So this project sometimes feels development heavy, but there's also an employer component. And so one reason we're working or thinking about what we could ask large employers to do is because in the Oregon Portland metro area, there is a mandatory program for large employers, and that is administered and required by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. So currently employers with 100 or more employees must provide commute options to employees designed to reduce the number of cars driven to work. And so they're considering, the DEQ is considering creating an eco rule that is applied statewide to all metro areas. And so as the Eugene Springfield metro area, within the next year or two, we could potentially, or our employers could potentially be required to provide employees with transportation options. And so we're trying to get ahead of that a little bit so that our employers are more prepared for this potential new rule or law that could come at the state level. And so I also wanted to take time to talk about what we're not doing as part of this project. So one thing that we're not doing is touching the parking code. We can create triggers that are related to the parking code, but we won't be opening up the parking code and revisiting it. And then we're not revisiting the system development charges methodology. So that was recently done. And so we won't be revisiting that. But if there is a need to update those things triggered by this project, there's going to be an action plan as part of this project, so it could be included as an action for future work. Okay, so what are we trying to get to? So for TDM and TIA, like we want to update and make progress towards our city goals outlined in the Transportation System Plan, Climate Recovery Ordinance, and Vision Zero Action Plan. And so the TSP was adopted in 2017, and there are those prioritized actions by council in the planning division, and they've kind of just been sitting there. We've been waiting for grant funding to implement some of those actions, and we finally got a grant to do it. And then for the TDM requirements, we want to foster a more efficient transportation system that gives people more options, whether that's through new development, existing employers, and or multifamily housing. So currently, none of these types of housing or employers are required to provide or promote transportation options. And so this is new to Eugene, but this is not new to the country. And just wanted to let everyone know that. So as part of the project, we did conduct what we call best practice research. And there's going to be, I won't go in depth on it now, but there's going to be the best practice report will be published online. And these are just the different municipalities that we talked to. And so more desired outcomes is that we want to explore opportunities in the planning process to implement improvements when new development is built, multimodal improvements. So examples of this could be filling in sidewalk gaps, requiring crosswalks on a street that we know is unsafe and is going to generate pedestrian or bike trips. Transit stop improvements, maybe a transit stop will have just a pole in the bus stop, and maybe the new development is going to generate more transit trips. So we could potentially ask the developer to install like a shelter because there's going to be more need for that transit stop. And then also complete connections that are close to the site to the bike network. And so one thing that we want to do is not to confuse the development process. And so we want it to be clear and simple. We had a focus group with different people that are part of the development community in Eugene. And one thing they expressed is that they want this project to be clear and objective. And then we want to offer a menu of options and give both developers and employers different ways that they can potentially meet these new requirements, but also while achieving our goals as a city. And so this is a list of how this project can meet our goals. So promote sustainability by lowering greenhouse gas emissions, improve community health and wellness by increasing active transportation and making our air cleaner, enhancing equity, reducing transportation costs, attracting and retaining employees and tenants by providing them with options to get around, eliminating or reducing their dependence on a motor vehicle, reducing traffic. You know, as we grow, right now we don't have a whole lot of rush hour traffic in Eugene, but as we grow, we'll start to see more traffic and potentially congestion at some point. So it could help reduce that. And then decrease development cost. If parking is not as necessary, then construction costs for the developers will be lower. So then next, I want to talk a little bit about the stakeholder involvement we've done so far. And some of you have participated in this. So last week, we conducted focus group with key stakeholders. We invited Julie to represent the ATC, and then we also invited Sue, and she represented WECAN. So Julie or Sue, if you want to comment later on your experience so far, feel free to do so. And then what we're doing now is we had, for those key stakeholders, we had a kickoff meeting in December, and then we did the focus groups last week. And so we are kind of in the middle of the stakeholder involvement process. And we're hoping to be what's called adoption ready. So there's code and administrative updates related to this project. So we're hoping to be adoption ready by this summer. And then it would take at least 6 months, possibly more, to get whatever is created from this project adopted by City Council. And so the potential role for the ATC is you can inform us. So I'm on the project management team, and then Shane and I are both on an internal working group for the city. So you can inform us on your thoughts of the project throughout the process. And I can come back and present to the ATC if there's interest at project milestones. Right now, it's more of an introduction because we haven't gotten too far into making decisions yet. And then the next steps is to have that second round of stakeholder involvement and focus groups in May, present to City Commission. So you're the first city committee that I presented to, but I'll be presenting to the Planning Commission and Sustainability Commission. And then we want to increase awareness among the general public about the project. So we'll push out more educational and public information. And then we also have interested parties email list. So if you're interested in being on that, let us know and we can add you to the list. So that is a brief overview. And now I can take questions and comments.
Go for it, Pete.
Oh, Pete, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Oops, double muted. The I understand that currently you do have to, that large developments have to do a traffic demand analysis or TDA, and you know there's been a lot of criticism of that just because they in some places because of for example Amazon corners, because people were concerned about how much traffic that would add. I don't know that that has actually come up after the thing was built. Is this really going to significantly change how they're going to do a transportation demand analysis? And so it's not going to be just cars, right? It's going to be as well trying to encourage taking that analysis and adding in active transportation types. Is that how I understand what you're doing?
Yeah, so one aspect of it is what I'm saying is revamp the current traffic impact analysis process. And so right now, as you and I mentioned, it is very dependent on vehicle traffic analysis, traffic counts. It doesn't take into consideration any other mode of transportation. And so that is really the way that it's structured now. It's not really getting us to the outcomes that we want to see for our transportation system be multimodal to be safe. And so this is going to be completely revamping that process so that it gets us to be multimodal and it gets us closer to reaching our goals as a city. And the TIA and TDM, what currently exists, those haven't been updated since the early 2000s. And so for the types of documents that we like to update, that's pretty old in our transportation planning documents. So there's definitely a need to catch up for the past like almost 20 years.
Thanks.
I didn't. Yeah, Alan or Andrew, I didn't see who was first. Go for it, Alan.
I think I was next. Hi, Larissa. My question has to do with the goals that are set for VMT reduction. Well, I guess it's not VMT reduction, but yeah, the metrics that you gave for Portland, which I think are based on DEQ, is a 10% reduction. Is that in VMT, or is it in number of trips? What is that? And is that adequate for Eugene, given our climate goals and the TSP? Is that being reconsidered to a higher level, maybe 20% or 25%?
Yeah, so what they do in Portland is they kind of take like a baseline survey to measure like when they begin a program, like how are employees getting to work. And then from that baseline, that's a 10% reduction goal. And so with the state, I was in a focus group for the state process. And so with that process, the state said, if like a city chooses to be more ambitious or progressive with the way that they meet this rule, they can do that. So we could have something different and something more ambitious that gets us closer to reaching our goals if we choose to do that through this process.
And my follow-up question is, then what happens if they don't meet those goals?
So currently they are fines. I don't know how much the fine is, but there is a fine if they're not meeting their goals.
Thanks.
I just wanted to chime in to say this is really exciting work. I didn't know about this, and that's really awesome to hear that you all are working on it. Just wanted to comment because you said that you were, I guess, maybe interested in hearing if staff should be directed. Is my personal feeling is that you all should definitely take a look at the system development charges, because I think especially with the affordability issues with housing and I don't know about commercial space, but at least with housing, if we can incentivize and give city staff more carrots to work with developers, and if those developers want to do things that help us meet our climate recovery goals and our transportation system goals, then we should totally have more tools for you all to help incentivize those other positive things. So I would fully support you all taking a look at that. I know it's a different process and probably a lot more involved, but since you asked, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and so for the current SDC methodology, there is a way for a developer to get a transportation incentive if they have a transportation demand management plan. So the incentive exists already. It's just we don't know where we're going to end up through this process, and so there might be a need to think about is that incentive enough? Do we want to change it in any way?
Just for curiosity's sake, as a follow-up, do you know how often developers actually take advantage of that incentive?
So we see, the one thing that triggers transportation demand management plans right now, most often we see it through the parking reduction. So that's like really the incentive is to lower their parking cost. But we don't see a whole lot each year. I think we see 1 or 2 a year. And so, it could definitely be different in the future. And that's also based on like what currently exists or triggers that currently exist. So if the triggers change, we could see more of that happening.
And I'll also just note that, yeah, we have had limited TDM programs come through that way. You know, we do have a TDM program in that we've been running transportation options programming for decades. And that's basically what these TDM programs are. They're just a lot more formalized. And the TDM lays out sort of what the menu of options are for the developers to choose from to sort of get at our goals and to reach theirs as well. And so we currently have a TDM, but it doesn't include a lot of what the possibilities are. And so a lot of this project is looking at what are those, you know, how can we incorporate transit in a different way, in a better way? Bike share isn't even called out at all. So there are, you know, other tools that need to be integrated into the TDM that just aren't yet. And yeah, and then also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Larissa, but the SDCs were recently updated. And as part of that, there's more flexibility for developers to access the TDM program to allow them to reduce the SDCs.
Yeah, they were recently updated within the past couple years. I'm not sure if the developers have taken advantage of the current like SDC TDM incentive that's in there.
So is there's some process by which those incentives might be increased in order to get folks to take advantage of them more often?
There's all kinds of, so there's beyond like the SDCs, there's all kinds of possibilities that we can think of around incentives. And so we haven't even gotten far enough into the process to really think about like what those possibilities are, but there are going to be like a brainstorm of ideas on how we can incentivize developers to promote transportation options more.
Go for it, Sue.
Yeah, I was just curious, especially as far as if we began to apply TDM to existing employers. We don't really have that many large employers, but one of the biggest trip generators certainly, and if you is the school districts, particularly 4J, but also Bethel. And I don't know if you take it as a district as a whole, certainly they have their large employer. Is there some way to hold the school districts accountable for the number of trips they generate?
Yeah, so that's another potential trigger. So right now, triggers are like 100 vehicle trips. We could, for new developments, so we could either potentially catch the school. So right now, for example, Edison Elementary created a TDM plan when they were reconstructing Edison. And so that was, I believe, related to their parking. And so in some ways that we're catching those already, but if we change the triggers, we could either catch them upon new development, or there is a way that we could look into whether or not we could ask the schools that exist now to promote transportation options to their students and their employees. We did have the focus group with developers, and 4J was one of the people that we invited to that. And so we'll continue to talk to 4J and hopefully reach out to Bethel as well in the process.
And I will highlight with Hillary here as well that the Safe Routes to School program is a TDM program. It's a traffic demand management program aimed at families and kids. So, you know, it's a transportation options, transportation demand management program. It's just not mandatory, but there are, you know, schools who certainly see it as almost mandatory, and you know, there is a really strong buy-in in our community around it. So, but
any last comments or questions?
suppose I should make a quick comment, since I did sit through that, was asked to participate in the original feedback from nonprofits, which was an interesting choice to choose me because I'm probably the least person on this committee who is savvy with these kinds of plans and acronyms. So it was a fairly mystifying process, and I do understand it a lot better now. I did read it beforehand and do the homework, but I sort of grasped it by the end of the meeting. And some things were truly mystifying to me, is why you would not include small employers, since most people do not work for companies that have 100 employees or more. They work for small companies, by far the greatest majority. So it was sort of mystifying to me. It was like, huh? Not including parking requirements was also mystifying as an outsider and an ignorant person. It was like, but it's all about parking. So why wasn't that included? And also that it should be just, why these artificial boundaries of where these things are kicked in. I mean, that is just, again, it was one of those things that was like, no, it's citywide. It's no matter where you are, you need to be able to get around. Whether it's a block behind some line that's on a city map, it was a very, very interesting process, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to learn a whole lot more, and I feel a little better educated now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
All right. Thanks, Larissa.
Thanks, everyone.
So we are now only 11 minutes behind. Good job. The next item is Active Transportation Committee 2021. I believe this agenda item is mostly about creating subcommittees. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
So we had two small discussion groups happen over the last couple of weeks with a subset of folks. Maybe we should start. Does somebody who was at one or the other of those meetings like to give us some a quick recap on things that were discussed? We can also just form subcommittees. I sent out some information. Sorry, if there's anything else. Oh, people are in the chat too on the last piece. I sent out some information regarding the communications subcommittee that is important to me personally. What else do we have? What are important things here, Josh?
So if I remember correctly from last month, we were going to have some sort of work program or work plan from city staff that they would be presenting to us. Is that still occurring, or are we going about this a different way?
I'm not sure if we had something. I was not aware
Sounds like
that
no.
was.
Sounds like another way. I will recap one thing that came about in one of the groups, and that was a discussion of the opportunity that we thought still existed for open streets and streeteries. And I think Andrew made some great points about how this is a moment in time where it's possible to have the greatest impact on changing people's attitudes and behavior towards travel habits. And so to the extent that we reform the programming committee, I think it would be great to focus a great deal of effort on the open streets and the streeteries program.
Yeah, I think, related to that, I think if there's a desire to I think that there was work that was happening on the programs committee, and then there was some discussion of having the communications committee. And so I think that one of the things that we want to empower ATC to work on the things that that you feel are going to be most effective. We definitely, from my perspective, we have things especially related to Move Huge and the Active Transportation Strategic Plan that we are wrapping that project up. And over this next year, I'll be working with you either through a subcommittee or through just bringing what we develop to the full committee on what this new Active Transportation Strategic Plan will look like. I would like to have some subgroup of ATC help in that process, but I also want you to feel empowered if there's more energy to put into the communication work. And then I know that Reed isn't with us tonight, but that the infrastructure committee work is important for helping in our prioritization of the pavement bond measure items and the active transportation pieces within that. So I want to leave that as a potential as well to continue.
Looks like Mary has a hand, and then Sue.
Yeah. So last year, as I understand it, there was infrastructure and programs. Is that right? Only those two committees? And then there's been some interest in adding a communication committee, which I think could be really good. So I guess I wanted to hear from some of the past participants to see what you think, like how effective were those committees last year? Did they cover the territory? Would adding communications plump things out nicely? I just wanted to hear some perspective from people who've been around a little bit.
So I was on the program subcommittee, and I thought it was very effective in spite of the changing climate. And I think that a communication subcommittee, in addition to it, would be great because we had just too many ideas to get a hold of.
The transportation subcommittee, infrastructure, is basically just Reed bouncing ideas or questions or designs off the committee, or at least that's the way it largely operated last year. I think there's a huge opportunity for subcommittee or even whole committee driven projects to be done. In years prior, the infrastructure subcommittee went out and looked at intersections around town and said, here are the dangerous intersections in town. And then we're able to provide city staff with a prioritized list. And so last year was a funky year for everyone. And so we didn't really do that. But I think that there's a lot of space, whatever subcommittee you may be part of, to do something. If you've got a project you want to work on, there's a group of people there who are available to help you on it.
And I'll add about the infrastructure subcommittee that one of the things that frequently would happen is that we would be making recommendations based on our own experience to Reed, but maybe not getting as much feedback from the wider community. And that is where I think a communications subcommittee could be really helpful. And then on the far side of a project, when something's implemented, say, 13th Avenue, getting the information back to the public or to city council or other organizations is another place where a communications subcommittee could be helpful.
Sue, yeah.
Yeah, as a newbie, I don't have a whole lot of insight into this. I was thinking, as far as the programs committee, since since things have pretty much been on hold for a year, I would be interested in seeing whether we can do it or staff, just kind of an analysis of all the various programs that the city has done. Number one, what were they in, what was their intended goal? Were they reaching out to current bicyclists? Are they trying to reach out to people who are not already using it? Is it, what exactly are they intended to do? And then how effective are they doing it? And especially in terms of staff time and money, because I suspect that we don't have enough of either. And if there are some of them that have been more effective, or if they're duplicative, or whatever, I'd be interested in seeing how we can streamline them, perhaps, and just make sure that they're accomplishing what we're trying to get them to accomplish. Because it's everything from Breakfast at the Bridges to Smart Trips to Sunday Streets to the Streeteries to there's a lot of things that the city does, and they're all fun, but whether I don't know if they're all doing uniquely effective things. And then I've never been entirely clear what the communications is. I mean, I guess I don't know if it's outreach, communicating with whom. I guess I've heard references to speaking to city council. I've heard of outreach to the general public or to different groups. I'm not entirely sure what and I didn't see where the mission or whatever the communications committee was. Because I guess what I'd be most interested in somehow is doing a culture change, so that when we have this great infrastructure, how do we change the culture so that lots of people want to go use it? So just change the culture. It's a modest charge.
And I guess just sort of following up on Sue's comment, also as a newbie, regarding sort of the infrastructure subcommittee, how I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about how people were organizing or actually, I guess organizing what projects to focus on or how to, work together outside of this meeting. Just a little bit more sort of logistics of how these programs worked.
So last year we kind of had a staff member point person for each one. Is that how we'll proceed this year?
Yeah, most likely. And I guess I don't know if Josh, your question was more towards the infrastructure specifically and just sort of the methodology of prioritization. Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Sure. Somebody mentioned a few minutes ago, people were looking at different intersections and identifying maybe points of conflict or problems. How was that data aggregated? How was it, organized and then, transferred back to the city?
Yeah. Josh, do you want to talk at all about?
I was not actually on infrastructure during that
that's
project.
Right.
I was on programs. And I think Alan might have been taking his bye year from the committee for that particular project. So we might not have anyone here from the project to talk about the methodology. But I know that they came up with a series of metrics and then looked at different intersections. And the key part of it was actually going out and writing those intersections so that they were getting personal experience and not just looking at a map and saying, well, it looks like there's a gap there. And I think that a lot of this is we are a citizen committee. And so citizens engage with the city all the time and give their opinions. And so we don't necessarily have to follow a particular methodology, let's say. If you have one that you're really keen on, pitch it and let's go with that. Would be my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely, I also didn't, as I led the programs committee and not the infrastructure committee, I just know in working with Reed, the sounding board aspect of, the ATC being an advisory committee, that it's really valuable to have this core group of active transportation users who are engaged in the system and can give input on, we can bring ideas as staff to you and act as a sounding board. But then it is also that, are there things that we're missing? Are there projects, we have a transportation system plan, but there's a lot in that network that needs to get built out. And we do have some prioritization, but then there are also other pieces that we might not be catching that we want to hear from the public and the committee about. And so I think that subcommittee was just, one of those sounding boards.
So I sat on the infrastructure committee last year, and one of the things that I did personally that was I would go and talk to people I know who either would live in different parts of town that I don't necessarily visit, and I'd be like, well, we're talking about this bike path and putting lighting here and things like that. So I'd say, well, what do you think of that, or what do you think of this? What are the problems you see there? So I solicit responses from different people, and then I bring it back to the infrastructure subcommittee, so that it wasn't just my opinion. I felt like I was trying to be a conduit for other people as well, and representing more than just me. And I kind of feel like that would be great is somehow if we could marry that sort of idea with the communications committee and the infrastructure type stuff. And I'm not sure how that would work, but I I think we've got a lot of very great people on this committee, but trying to get more engagement to the community at the whole, which of course we haven't been able to do because of COVID as much, but that's where the program committee is, as far as I knew, was kind of their purpose. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective on it.
Well, it seems like when I think about the Active Transportation Committee and what our mission is, it probably says it somewhere, but in my mind, it is really to support the city staff to, I think it's like tripling the number of active transportation users, and everything else comes under that, like safety and infrastructure. And, if that's our ultimate goal, then it's like, are these committees that we're setting up, are they going to position us best to do that? And then within those committees, I would think that's up to them to figure out like what is the best way. We don't have to know what the communications committee is going to do right now, but I feel like a communications committee could be responsive to things that come up, like write that letter to the editor, go to the city council, maybe work on the Facebook page that Steve's doing. I think they could do a lot of different things and interface with the other two groups. But to me, it's the ability to really be responsive and act, because I think that we can talk about things a lot, but I think the outreach would be a really good thing. And I don't know if this group of 14 of us can support 3 different committees, or if there's a different way to structure it.
So in the interest of time, let's make some decisions here. It sounds like there is a desire for at least 3 committees: infrastructure, programs, and communications. Regarding Mary's question just now, so my personal feeling is I'd like to be involved with both programs and communications. I imagine that more folks are going to want to be just involved with one. Suggestions as to the best way to distribute ourselves, or other logistical comments. Yeah.
I would suggest that it sounds like we're headed that direction. I'd say we form those 3 committees and find a way to encompass all the discussion we've had into a program for each committee at the first committee meeting, because clearly I don't think we're going to get it done here. I do think that 14 people is enough to staff 3 committees, and 7 on a committee is maybe even too many.
So that sounds like an almost motion, Steve. Are we ready for a motion for this?
Do we need a motion?
Steve, that was such a
I was
good.
I don't think we need a motion here.
Well, does everybody agree on the 3 committees? So that, I'm not, it seems like maybe we do, because there could be somebody who's saying, I don't want to do that.
Well, let me make a motion then that we continue the 2 committees that we had last year, the Programming and the Infrastructure Committee, and add a third, a Communications Committee, and that each member of the ATC should communicate to Dan by email their interest in which committee they want to participate in, and we will, and Dan will establish in all of his spare time, the time and place of the first meeting for each committee.
Great, as well as a facilitator point person for each of those to set up the first meeting.
Or we could dump it on Grace, the co-chair, since she's not here.
Can, Andrew?
Yeah, I was just gonna maybe a question to the group. Since these are all volunteering for committees, you've kind of talked about size of the committees, how many people might want to be on. I was going to suggest, just in the interest of time and for simplicity, if everyone emails you, Steve's motion I think was kind of to email which committee you want to be on, but I was going to suggest that we just allow people to volunteer for whatever committees they want to. So that's 1, 2, even 3. If you really want to donate your time, that we just allow people to sign up for whatever, and you can participate as much as you want in those committees.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a bad idea. It's a question more than a suggestion.
Yeah, no, that seems fine. Just so we can kind of get a sense of it, can I just get a raised hand as to folks' interest in each of the committees? So who is interested, who may be interested in the infrastructure committee? Can we just get a hand? Okay, so looks like 6 hands-ish. Okay, who might be interested in programs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Great. Who's interested in communications? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So these seem like they're all healthy groups. And then, so what was it? Email me and Grace. Me and, me and Grace. And we will create a shared document with everyone's interest and organize the first meeting, or someone will organize the first meeting of all of them. Other ideas, Lee?
Just one comment. In the past, Shane and Reed went to the subcommittee meetings, and so having another meeting could be a staff issue. But I actually don't see a need or requirement to have a staff person at the meeting. Sometimes it's helpful, but that's something that I want you to think about. There might not be a staff person there.
Yeah, definitely. There's another hand somewhere. No. Okay. Okay. Any other comments about this before we move on? Great. Awesome.
So,
Subcommittees.
do we have a motion? Do we need to act on that, or can we just do it informally? Did we just already decide?
It doesn't necessarily need a motion.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're doing it. I saw a lot of raised hands. Okay. All right, last thing. Oh, Bryce, I'm sorry. Do we have your audio yet?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yay. I'm here. Hey, Steve. Yep, I guess I'm officially the new liaison from the BPAC as of yesterday or Tuesday. So here I am, just kind of watching the goings on with you guys.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You guys meet every month, right? Not every other?
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, I will keep up with all that.
Good to have you. Okay, so yeah, the last piece is project updates from, I guess, just Shane, and information share afterwards.
Sue, you want to jump in with something?
Oh, yeah.
Out of time, we were going to name people to draft this letter about the electric scooters and stuff.
you want to do that, Dan? You want to?
Yes. Sue, are you interested in organizing that?
Not really.
Okay. Okay. Is there someone who's interested in bottom lining, making that letter happen?
I'll volunteer for that.
Great.
So that-
Who would like to help Steve? Or you can just email him.
I will.
I'll help.
I will too.
That was Sue and Mary.
And then you can send it out to the rest of us and we can provide some feedback for you. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So Reed usually gives project updates on different infrastructure projects. I kind of gave my major project update around bike share. But I will highlight a couple things that I know about outside of those. And one of those is that we are doing May is Bike Month. And so I encourage folks to check out We Bike Lane and start thinking about what kind of event or ride you want to do that is COVID safe. We are going to have guidelines up, but if you go to We Bike Lane, you can put an event in there, and we encourage community members to create some sort of ride or something that encourages people to get out and ride during May's Bike Month in whatever way you can imagine that is safe in these COVID times. But we think that we had some really good luck during the 13th Avenue opening of doing some fun and safe events. And we plan to hold some education and live stream events. And we have all of our partners that we've had involved in years past joining us and thinking about creative things to do as well. So May will be a big launch of our bike share relaunch. And we really want to use that month to get all those people out there and create that culture change that Sue was talking about. We know that a lot more people are riding. The bike shops are flooded with people buying bikes, and parts are limited. And so we know that we are in the second bike boom. And I think it's going to be a good time for us to really leverage that. And so I encourage you to get other people excited and get them out, even if they're just riding on their own. So I want to highlight that. Cass is also working on other pieces of our TO program, including open streets, and Harlow will be happening for sure. And we're talking about what other programs might happen, including an internal TO program for the City of Eugene staff to help us get to know our Get There program a little bit better, and then work with U of O and other large employers. So that project's moving ahead. And then we have on the infrastructure side, also related to programs, is we are hoping to do another boost on 13th Avenue. We've made some tweaks, and we had a good meeting with some advocates the other day and our lead traffic signal engineer on how the work that we've done and the work that we hope to continue to do to improve the 13th Avenue corridor for safe and efficient transportation. And we've talked a lot about that in the past, but that is still happening. And the key piece there is that we want to get 13th right, and we want to learn so that as we go into the design phase this year on High Street, that when we build it next year, that we have it dialed in and ready as well. So I think that's all I'll talk about now, because I know we're short on time.
Any other information share from committee members?
I just wanted to mention that Floyd Przansky, a state senator from, I think, Douglas County, has introduced a bill into this 21 legislative session that would raise from 1% to 5% of all funds received from the state highways to go to biking and footpaths. So write your local representative and support it if you support it.
Lloyd lives here in Eugene.
Oh, okay. That's Senate Bill 395.
the University of Oregon is hosting an Urbanism Next conference in March. I believe it's the March 11th to 18th. And a lot of what that conference is about is the future of transportation in cities. And I don't know if it's possible for any of the ATC members to get access to that online forum. And maybe you know the answer to that, or maybe Lee, you might know. But I think it might help inform some of our future meetings if some people were able to attend.
I don't know, but I'll ask.
I can look into it too. There might be a reduced rate this year, especially because it's online.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We made it on time.
Thanks, everybody.
Think so.
So email me your interest in subcommittees, please, or I will bug you.
Thanks all.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.